Last week on the 18th of November 2022, Uganda lost a political icon, Dr. Paul Kawanga Ssemwogerere. The former President General of the Democratic Party, who passed on at 90 years at his home in Rubaga, has left a legacy. The former two-time presidential candidate in 1980 and in 1996 is remembered for his strong belief in non-violent means to power. As a strong believer in political pluralism, he served in President Museveni's broad-based government that came to power through the gun in 1986. He held several ministerial positions from 1986 to 1995 until he fell out with Museveni due to ideological differences. Dr. Paul Kawanga Ssemwogerere was the last kind of opposition political leaders who believe in a united opposition and are civil in opposing ruling governments.
Extremely important that we revisit the constitutional and legal framework to ensure that democracy under multi-party dispensation is to be embraced wholeheartedly by all institutions in the government. When we've done that, ensure that the body or the authority which oversees, which controls the funding, is totally independent and its integrity is beyond the question. We have to learn from other countries which have done this very well.
He was the first politician to advocate for regulating the use of money in electoral politics at a time when nobody cared about money in politics.
For the opposition parties to freely access money, even from their own members, let alone from those who are better off, say in business, but depend very much on working harmoniously with the government at the time. So
money has been used in favor of the ruling party. Money has been used in favor of the ruling party. Money has been used in favor of the ruling party. Money has been used in favor of the ruling party. Money has been used in favor of the ruling party. Money has been used in favor.
The fallen political giant who led DP for 25 years also believed in the concept of proportional representation as opposed to the winner takes it all. He advocated for proportional representation that recognizes and rewards political parties' representation in parliament according to the number of votes a political party has garnered in an election. Until he breathed his last, he always tried to unite the opposition political parties in Uganda. Today, on Acfim Talks, we dedicate this episode to celebrate Dr. Paul Kawanga Ssemwogerere, a politician of a rare kind and the last of his generation.
Indeed, today we dedicate this episode to celebrate the oracle of Uganda's multi-party politics, Dr. Paul Kawanga Ssemwogerere, who passed on. It's exactly a week. It was it's a Friday, I think, when news began streaming in, and we continue to celebrate the icon. Yesterday, Parliament also paid tribute to the late Dr. Paul Kawanga Ssemwogerere, and we'll be having a discussion into that. And before we start, allow me to welcome everybody. Welcome to yet another episode of Acfim Talks. Today, the 25th of Friday, November 2022. We are live on Facebook and Twitter, AcfimUG. You can also get us on Twitter at AcfimUG and YouTube, AcfimUG. You can be part of this conversation and follow us live. You'll be able to get the notifications. Just subscribe and you won't be able to miss any of these. We are always live every Friday between 11 and midday. Once again, you are most welcome. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are catching us from. Welcome to Acfim Talks. Your host, Felix Kafuma, and I am joined by two distinguished gentlemen. They are regulars on Acfim Talks. It's good to have them on stage. I have with me Henry Kasacha, who is the current executive director of Dialogue and Democracy Training Center. He's been very, very instrumental in supporting democracy and governance work close for 20 years. He is also remembered to be a founder, program manager of Inter-Party Organization for Dialogue, IPOD, at a time when creating a platform to support political parties that are represented in parliament. That idea was birthed with the support of Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy. It's good to have you, Henry, on Acfim Talks.
Thank you very much, Felix, and it's always nice to join the talks. And I'm happy to be here as we celebrate the life of our friend, our leader, the great Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere.
Thank you so much. I'll also be joined at some point with Henry Moguzi, who is also a regular. He's an electoral democracy expert and corruption activist, and also the executive director of Alliance for Finance Monitoring. When he joins us, I'll be able to recognize him. But as we wait for Henry, again, today we dedicate this episode to just celebrate Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere, his contribution to the country, to democracy. He has left a legacy which is worth and talking about. And there is much more people don't know about Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere in terms of the things he did right from when he joined politics from around 1958, working as an understudy to then Ben Chwanga was the DP president. And since then, but even before joining, he served at I think the vice guild president of Makerere University. So right from a young age, he had distinguished himself as a leader who loved to serve. And we are going to just have a reflection on his contribution, his personality, and what can we learn as Ugandans, as politicians, from such a maestro. And let me start with you, Henry. Just can you describe the late Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere in terms of his political career and life, from your perspective?
Well, from my perspective, I think that a description of Dr. Kawanga is not very easy, but it basically revolves around the nature of person he was, the politics he practiced, the methods he opted to use, and the values Dr. Semogere believed in. Dr. Semogere, in terms of description, was a person who believed in non-violence. He believed in truth and justice. And these were not just slogans, but these were values that were so much into Dr. Semogere, both in his personal life, in private discussions, and in his politics. This was Dr. Semogere. He was a very strong person in terms of justice. Dr. Semogere valued human life like nothing. And to Dr. Semogere, nothing could be, he could not lose a life for anything in this world. He could not lose a life for politics. He could not allow lives being lost for leadership, for positions, and for being in government. Dr. Semogere was also a very peace-loving person. He believed in working together, regardless of the differences. Dr. Semogere always believed that we had common elements, we had commonalities that could unite us despite of our political diversity. So I think that in terms of description, the late Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere was very grounded in terms of values. He was not a transactional leader. He believed in what he practiced. And he was a very humble person. I mean, both after leaving government and also leaving the leadership of the party, he stayed in his home and he was very humble in nature. All his discussions resolved around being humble as a politician. I also think that Dr. Smogeda had a very firm foundation in terms of being nurtured, with the values being centered into whatever he was doing as a politician. So briefly, that's what I can describe the late Dr. Semogere. I think he was one in his class or his league, and we have so many to learn from the late Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere.
Wow, there you have it. Yesterday I was following the news, and as Parliament was eulogizing, celebrating, Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere's life, many of them did allude to the fact that he was a nationalist. He loved country first, a very rare character among today's politicians, loving country first, and the vanguard of democracy and rule of law. And that explains his contribution in as Uganda was gaining independence. Was very instrumental. I think and DP as a party, I think it's the first party to hand over power peacefully, a short-lived power between 1961 and then they handed it over to UPC-KY Alliance. Peace, I think it's the only peaceful transfer of power we've experienced as a country, again under DP. So DP presents a very, as a party, it has, it is really inked in democracy and the non-violent means. It is also, as many did refer to him as a man of integrity, who believed so much and pushed for multi-party democracy. And I'll come back to that, the issue of multi-party democracy, because when you read history, I think from around 2000, between 2000 and 2002, he did challenge the one-party state, the NRM, at that point in time. In fact, his name is inked in the Political Parties Organizational Act processes that led to that act in 2002. Is quite a remarkable man. Henry, you are most welcome. We've been here having just reflecting on the man, Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogeere, the late, and you've joined us at the right time. You're most welcome, Henry Amoguzi. I think you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear. My namesake, Kasacha, quite an honor to be with you on the platform once again.
Thank you very much.
Great, great, Henry. In fact, let me also give you a chance to, in your own words, how can you describe the life and career of the late Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogeere?
Well, of course, Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogeere is a man you cannot describe in just a few words. But I want to highlight one of the things that I really gave him credit for. You will understand that Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogeere takes over the reins of the Democratic Party at a time when the party was quite unpopular in the country. You'd recall what happened with Ben Chwanuka, where the Kingdom Buganda fell out with Ben, and then they had to enter alliance with the UPC, that KY UPC alliance. So Semogeere, as a young, Democrat, takes over this party and had to fight that, and we give him credit for having made sure that he did restore the popularity of the party in Uganda, because by the time we went into elections in 1980, you would see that the kingdom, the region, the Uganda region, was 100% behind the party. So it's not a small thing. It's not easy to return the perceptions, but also the support of the entire kingdom that had fallen apart. So we credit his organizing capabilities for having done this. We also remember him as a peacemaker. I think you mentioned about this earlier, because throughout he believed in peace. This man is the one that always put country first. What we've seen lately is quite a number. Is that there are a number of politicians that put self before country. When you put self before country, it means you do everything possible to make sure that you protect your personal interests. This man, even when in 1980 the elections were stolen, for the good of the country, he said, let it go. I remember when he was advising the current principal of NOP so vividly that it is not worth it to have people take blood just in the interest of you standing. So you get to see that he was always a peacemaker. But of course, the other thing you want to take away were his views about financing of politics and political parties. You recall we hosted him at one time in the symposium of 2020, and then one of the things we remember is that what he called the 6 feature model, and he had, of course, very strong views about financing political parties. I had an opportunity as a person to interact with the departed Democrat, and we spoke at length about the political finance systems of Uganda and where he sees this going, and what he thinks would have been the solution to fix the runaway commercialization and monetization of elective politics. And so, in a few words, this is how I can remember him. But of course, we are going to miss him. But of course, also to know that he planted the seeds of what he called brain power, in BP. You earlier on alluded to that, the case that they won against the one-party dictatorship, as they called it. And of course, the constitution would rule in their favor, and that would precursor the return to multi-party political dispensation. Back to you, Felix.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who don't know, let me add this, that he also had a stint of teaching. He taught in Namiriango College and also at St. Leo's. And that's where he was approached. That's where I was approached and by Ben Chwanuka to join politics around 1959. So, and he was also a boxer in his early days. So, very, very interesting character of the late. But there's something I want to point out here as well, that he has also tested, in as much as he did push for peace within a context that was volatile and authoritarian at that place. He also tested prison life. I think he was incarcerated together with Ben Chwanuka between 66 and around 71. So, and he also, as a presidential candidate, he was no stranger to some form of mistreatment, especially there were incidents, they have not been popularized, been kept under wraps, how he struggled to campaign in 1996 and how he had to come up against all sorts of state interferences, including what was perceived to be some kind of like a sabotage when he was going to conduct his last rally somewhere in Kalangala. But I'll come back to that later. Henry Kasacha, let me looking at Dr. Paul Kawanga's approach to politics.
Yeah.
Do you think that kind of approach to politics, which Dr. Paul Kawanga practiced and believed in, still does it have a place in the authoritarian context right now, where Uganda is at the moment?
Well, thank you very much. I think that going back to Dr. Kawanga Semogerere and his approach was driven by the values he stood for, and the values of respecting human rights, respecting the rule of law, respecting human life, respecting and promoting justice are values that will remain values even in a dictatorship. And if you believe in those values, you will continuously believe in the approach Dr. Semogerere took. I personally had the opportunity of always meeting Dr. Semogere in his sitting room and would talk at length. He would share some of his experiences, and you could see the conviction in his approach. Actually, unfortunately, we were supposed to meet with Dr. Semogere on the 22nd of this month. That's when he told me, Kasacha, please call me on the 22nd and we have another round of discussions. But the most important thing about his approach is that his approach is driven by values. His approach was not the end justifies the means. His approach was that the means were as equally as important as the destination. Dr. Semogere could lose an election, he could see his victory being taken away, and he would not even throw a stone, which is very challenging to so many people. The fact that he chose legal litigation to promote multi-party democracy also speaks to his commitment to those values. So I think that one of the challenges we face as a country and the challenges we face as Africa or as many developing countries that are struggling with improving systems is that we have a leadership that may not be so grounded in values of development and values of sustainable development and values of human rights. But that does not mean that these values can be disregarded. Even this, it is very difficult to have or to implement them. I think that some of these values, and the other issue is that Dr. Semogere rose to the leadership through a very long and carefully planned process. He did not emerge from anywhere to become President General. He did not emerge from anywhere to become what he became. He went through a nurturing process. And this is also one of the things that Dr. Semogere believed in, that you cannot promote these values if you do not nurture people. We remember him for his work in the Uganda Young Democrats. UID emerged at a time when we are in the movement system, when the political space was closed. It emerged as a very energetic, vibrant, and sometimes aggressive youth organization. But through the likes of Dr. Semogere, continuously talking to these young Democrats about some of these values, some of them actually have picked them. So I would say that that the values Dr. Semogere believed in, the approach. I want to share an example. In 2010, we traveled to Ghana with the political parties to look for dialogue and to learn from their experience. In Ghana, they told us, and they told me as the facilitator of the process, that unless you can identify people in your country who are respected across the board, who believe in the talking, you may not be able to pursue political dialogue in this country. Dr. Semogere had retired from politics. He was in Ruaga. I approached Dr. Semogere and told him exactly this. I believe that Dr. Semogere would still be listened to across the board. He believed in this approach, despite having all the reservations about political dialogue. Dr. Semogere was always ready to give dialogue a chance. He had actually agreed to be part of a selected panel of elders who would reach out to various political players to search for consensus. One of the challenges we have is that the search for consensus has been abandoned. And it's just a few like Dr. Semogere who believe that it is possible to look for consensus. It's not enough to say we do not have consensus. It's not enough to say that people do not believe in dialogue. But Dr. Semogere realized that some people do not believe in dialogue, and he deliberately made his efforts to convince them to believe in dialogue. This he did at a national level, but even within the Democratic Party, that has also been extremely unstable ever since he left leadership of the party. He has always told that line. So I would say that yes, the values that Dr. Semogere believed in are not values that can grow overnight, are not values that can emerge because people believe these values are good. These are values that must be nurtured. Unfortunately, we do not have so many people who have been nurtured in these values. And what this means is that we must make deliberate efforts, like Dr. Semogere did, to nurture people into these values. Otherwise, the country may not see any progress. It may go into reverse mode. if we do not practice the nature of politics that we want to pursue. The fact that he also believed in proportional representation shows you that how Dr. Semoge believed in accommodating. And the other element that comes through Dr. Semogere is he joined government in 1986 and he left in 1996. He did not join the NRM, he joined government. And some of us who had the opportunity of having private discussions with him, he also discussed and shared with us his experience in that kind of government, where he was an opposition leader and he was part of government. So I think that what Dr. Semogere practiced and what he believed in is still relevant for the sustainability of our democratization process as a country.
Thank you so much. Indeed, he served as the Minister of Internal Affairs, then served as the Second Deputy Prime Minister, then served as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and at some point he served as the Minister of Public Service. So, like you said, he served in government but didn't join them. Henry, you've had such as response in terms of whether we still have a place in the context Uganda is right now, the authoritarian context, for the kind of politics Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere practiced. As you comment on that also, there is a question that speaks to Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere's eye for, because he's the first person who talked about campaign financing, the concept of money in politics. What did he see at that time, when most people were not necessarily seeing it, but he was able to see it, that a couple of years later on, also Alliance for Finance Monitoring, which you had and where you were founder, you were able to grasp and say, this is the real problem Uganda is facing.
Thank you very much, Felix. Of course, the major challenge you are facing as Uganda is the lack of democracy. And therefore, for anybody to survive in the current context, there should be what you can call political tolerance. For the kind of political leaders we have now in place, where the regime, kind of the mantra seems to be we either win or they lose. You cannot practice democracy, and therefore you need people of the mentality and political mindset of the departed Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere in order for you to navigate this situation. And of course, for us as a country, we have tested almost everything. We have tested violence. We've been changing regimes. We've never seen we have never witnessed a peaceful transfer of power. But what has resulted from that? I think the learning must be that using military force or insurgency to change political leadership has not worked. And therefore, we need to hang in there and believe that the very values that the departed doctor believed in can still apply. Okay, I liked when my namesake spoke about Dr. Semogere's belief in representative in proportional representation. I remember him telling me when we were having a discussion that he believed so strongly that if this was the kind of system we were practicing in 1980, there would have been no cause for Mr. Museveni to go to the bush, because he had won a seat, and therefore his party would have shared the spoils of power if proportional representation was the system being practiced. Because the current system of winner takes all, or one they refer to as first past the post, does not seem to be working, because it disenfranchises and disgruntled many political leadership. But away from that, we remember so vividly that he published a book he calls Political Party Financing in Uganda, a reality check. And of course, he looked and saw, and of course, he was alive to the reality that money is the mother's milk of politics. Without money, you cannot have politics. And therefore, he knew that this subject had to be addressed. And at the time, it was quite peripheral on the minds of many political analysts. So he chooses to write a book, and I remember speaking specifically with what was his mindset when he was writing his book. And I think he tells me that one of the things that spurred him into action were he had read the amendment to the Political Parties and Organizations Act that allowed public financing of political parties. But before that amendment, there had been a provision where if you were nominated to contest for presidential elections, as it were in 1996 when he contested, the Electoral Commission will provide you with a war chest of just 20 million. And he told me at the time he received 20 million shillings, he needed a minimum of 50 billion to campaign. And therefore, 20 million would be a drop in the ocean. And therefore, that was not adequate. But even when the Political Party and Organizations Act was amended in 2010 to allow public financing of political parties, he said there was an inherent structural imbalance, because to propose, there are two issues he had issues with. The first one is the formula of numerical strength when it came to day-to-day running of the political parties, and he was telling me that it's not clear what they meant day-to-day activities, because those activities are not kind of prescribed, and therefore that remained vague. But also the other one is that what would happen if the party in power is not the one that has a commanding majority in parliament? Because that could happen. For now, the party in power, the regime has a commanding majority, but it could be the other way around. And so he said that could provide a structural imbalance. But also when it came to financing, the provision on financing elections, which according to the amendment, the money then would be shared equally. His issues were that it's not clear what the law referred to as elections. It wasn't clear whether what the law refers to as elections includes the political presidential elections, parliamentary elections, or local council elections. And therefore, they don't have to define those. But even then, you would see that the challenge he had was the lack of regulations then to define what that would be. But we commend and remember him having taken the effort to put this in writing, because the only way you can put your views, you can present your views for the next generation to benefit from or refer to, is to put them in writing. And the fact that he emerges as the first politician to put pen and paper, to put his views in writing on political financing, I think is something we will forever commend, and it's something for us as activists that are working on promoting transparency and accountability in political financing will forever be grateful for and refer to. Thank you, Felix.
Thank you so much. And we are going for a short break, but when we return, we will continue with the discussion, looking at the man who believed so much in a united opposition, and we shall pick it up from there. What does that now mean moving forward, now that he has left the scene?
Hey,
Why are you running?
that sounds so crap.
When are you leaving my house?
I think you just give me 1 month. Huh? Just 1 month. I strategize and when I'm able to relocate my family.
My dear, I have given you more than enough time. So your problem is relocating your family.
No, I need to relocate them, but also, of course, more time.
That
The
can
idea
be-
is
that can
give
be
me more
handled.
time.
That should be enough to settle you down.
Anyway, thank you.
What is he doing in my home?
I own this place now. Madam, you have 3 days to vacate.
What is the meaning of this, Nathan?
I'm sorry, Beatrice. I've sold this house.
Without my consent? I'll fight this madness.
No, Beatrice, please. Beatrice, please, Beatrice. That man is very connected. He's very powerful. Please let's not go there. Besides, he has given me a check. We can start from here. We can really start from here.
But why? Why would you do such a thing?
Beatrice, I had politics, campaigns. I had to use. I need a lot of money to remain in the race.
You borrowed money from this moneylender to run campaigns? Didn't I warn you from taking such a move?
We are unnecessary.
This doesn't concern you.
But I needed to save our parliamentary seat.
But you still lost. However much we invested. We are worthy 5 million? Only?
Hey, Beatrice, Mana. In politics, you fall and rise. You fall and rise. You can lose an election.
So you believe you will rise again?
Yes, I can win again and become a parliamentarian and put my life back together. Would you write another one? Hey, Beatrice! Please, Beatrice! Please don't leave me.
Leaders like these are highly susceptible for political corruption and will not be service delivery oriented.
Contribute today at www.politicalfinanceafrica.org/donate.
Welcome back from the break. You're still watching Acfim Talks. We are celebrating the oracle of Uganda's multi-party politics, the late Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere. And with me, I have Henry Kasacha and also I have Henry Muguzi. Both of them are democracy experts. They have personally had experiences with this gentleman, the late whom we are discussing. And we are trying to reflect on the legacy he has left behind. You can be part of this conversation. We are live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You can send in your questions. You can also your comments, whatever it is, as we celebrate the icon. And I was reading here something interesting that this gentleman was unique to the sense that in 2001, he supported Dr. Kizza Besigye in his presidential bid. Even when he belonged to DP, in 2016, he supported Mama Mbabazi. And also in 2021, he supported Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu. He shows you a man who believed in rallying behind another person, even if that person was not necessarily coming from the Democratic Party. And remember, he rallies behind National Unity Platform when DP had a candidate running as a president. Quite interesting. But let me pick my comment from there, and probably I'll bring in Kasacha here to throw your thoughts. Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere believed in a united opposition, and everybody does actually allude to the fact that I think it's a value he did espouse, putting country first. He died before seeing this dream come true. And my question is, why is it so difficult for the opposition to come together? What is the real problem here?
Well, thank you very much. I think that the opposition to come together is a political process, and it's a political dialogue. And political dialogue has never been a very easy process, particularly if it is not well facilitated. Because to some people, unless the process is facilitated well, you will not be able to get anywhere. So challenge we have had in the country is that we have had processes that have been united on the goal to get power to go in government, but may not be united in terms of sharing the vision for this country, the long-term vision. So why it is so difficult is that the challenges have been with the process and how the process has been facilitated. A political dialogue takes a lot of time, and it requires full commitment. And to have full commitment would require a strong value system Now, one of the biggest challenges we have at the moment is that many of our politicians, particularly those who proclaim or want to pursue dialogue, do not believe in these methods of work. That is why they are so easy at giving up. That is why they are so easy at blaming this and blaming that. So one of the biggest challenges of political dialogue in this country has been the poor facilitation of the process. Number two, it has been with the nature of interest of the players. Not all these players are interested in a strong, united opposition per se, but they may be interested in the united, strong opposition depending on how much it can advance their career. So the likes of Dr. Semogere, who are unfortunately not with us, are not leaves us in a very difficult situation because much as we believe in political dialogue, the proponents or the promoters of political dialogue are still scanty, they are still scared, and some of them do not know how to facilitate the process. So I would say that this has been a fundamental problem. Our political parties, because of poor planning and lack of proper facilitation, have always considered political dialogue at the eve of the election. Yet they have to consider so many factors into this meeting, into coming together. So challenges have been that one, we do not have values as a political class. Number two, we have different interests. Number three, the process has not been well facilitated. And number four is that we are not likely or we are not in position of contributing to one united Uganda. I think the material nature, the benefits, the material benefits that come from political offices have made political leaders abandon the search for political consensus. So broadly, I think that those are the key issues that have been affecting our political dialogue as a country and as the opposition.
Thank you so much. Probably Henry, because you weigh in there because Lubaga, where the residents of the late for the last, I think, last 4 election cycles has been now. I would call it a political maker for opposition figures who want to take on the highest seat in the land, and the late has always been encouraging them to form a united front, have an opposition that is united. And what are your thoughts? Is this still feasible, even when the late left without seeing it come through?
Thank you very much, Felix. In 2019, I had a discussion with the late Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogerere, and his views were clear. He's told me that Ugandans have been ready for a united opposition fielding a single opposition candidate since 2011. And of course, one of the reasons why the opposition cannot unite, I think I'm going to point out to one of them is the lack of ideological clarity. And the second one is divergence of political objectives. There are members who are in opposition, but their interest is not to capture power. Theirs is to stay in opposition. And therefore, for someone who wants to stay in opposition and use elections as a platform to demonstrate that they exist, there's no way you're going to ask them to step down or support a single candidate. But I think also it's about political maturity, because you see, until everybody is able to see the bigger picture, you're not able to see one giving way. It is impossible for everybody to kick the ball at the same time and the ball goes in. What will most likely happen is that the ball will stumble there and the opponent will take it. But also you need to credit the regime, because the regime has mastered the art of keeping the opposition as disunited as it can get. And therefore, the role there has to be played. So until this has happened, and I don't see it happening, because I think in the run up to the 2021 general elections, I saw that the departed Dr. Semogerere was trying everything possible to see that opposition fields a single candidate. but you can clearly see that the objectives were different. If you listened to Kyagulanyi, you would see that his reasons for standing were different from the reasons that would be projected by General Muntu, different from what General Henry Tumukunde had in mind, different from what Katumba had in mind. And so until there is clarity, and that comes with the political maturity, and unfortunately, for that maturity to happen, there needs to be in place a regime that is able to tolerate and allow political parties to grow and groom leaders without being exposed or predisposed to external disruptions. And so I think we are not about to see that happening in the next election, even when the man has departed. We wait to see what happens after the 2026 elections. Back to you, Felix.
Wow, that's quite interesting. In fact, interestingly, that most of the political icons we have right now, even those probably who are in, some of them who are in NRM, have their roots in DP. Either their parents who are staunch DP members, and you see that DP nurtured the leaders, and many of the leaders we have today. Semogere, the late himself, is a product being nurtured by the late Ben Chwanuka, growing through the ranks, first as an aide, then he became a DP publicity secretary between 62 and 69, and then later on in 1980 becomes the DP President General, and until 2005, I think, around there, when we now have multi-party politics, that he hands over the baton to the late Savannah, is it? Yeah, I think it's the late Savannah. So, and now where we are now, you are again seeing a very different outfit of DP. But you can see some sense of grooming and handing over the baton. Is this something other political parties can learn from? Because I think there are very few that have been successful to have this baton move from one person to another. Is this kind of culture DP has? How can this now motivate other political parties? And let me start with you, Henry Kasache, on that one. You are muted.
I'm muted, sorry. I think, can you hear me now?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the culture of handing over power is not yet grounded in the Democratic Party, despite the fact that DP has practiced it. We have not seen people committed to this culture. And we would say that the current challenges in the Democratic Party also resolve around leadership. The fact that the party has been embroiled in leadership struggles for the last close to 20 years is a sign that this culture has not yet grounded. The malpractice that takes place within the various processes shows you that we still lack that culture as a country. We want to be pushed all the time. We have not had that. We may use the idea that DP handed over to claim credit, which is due credit, because that group of leaders believed that that was the solution for stability and organizational growth. They believed, and if you can look at from the record that they have put in place, if a leader believes in handing over power, if a leader believes that a leadership is like running a relay, where you play your part and hand over to the others, you will see deliberate efforts on the part of those leaders to nurture and groom and prepare future leaders. Now, these are things that Dr. Semogere practiced when he was President General and when he left the party. Now, over time, across the country, we have not seen such deliberate efforts. And that leaves us with a very difficult question that, yes, we may have the history, we may have the records, which can be said we are so proud of, but to what extent have we nurtured the current crop of leaders to believe in this value beyond using it as a slogan? So I think that is the biggest test we have as a country. that we cannot continuously talk about the values that people like Semogere believed in. We cannot talk about peaceful handover of power when we do not practice peaceful handover of power. And this is an issue that cuts across all the political parties. The mere fact that the internal processes of a political party are not free and fair demonstrates that the culture has not yet been grounded among many of the current crop of leadership. So it remains a challenge, both at a national level, within the NRM, within the political parties. If you do not see any deliberate efforts of the leaders to prepare and nurture people, to nurture successors, then that shows you that the culture has not yet been embraced by the leaders.
Thank you so much. Someone was reminding me that FDC has also been able to demonstrate handing over power, and then also UPC has demonstrated handing over power. I don't know about the case of UPC because from Obote to Miria to now the Sun, it's quite interesting. Henry, can you weigh in on that? Especially the element of grooming.
Of course, you bring in the interesting thing of UPC. It has always been from Obote to Obote. I mean, what kind of power is that? And for the UPC, you get to see that Dr. Kizza Besigye may not have left. I think he's still there. If he left physically, the spirit is there and haunting them. But when it comes to nurturing leaders, you get to see that most of the political parties we have around have been formulated to serve interests of individuals that founded them, which is why when they cannot start a situation where they nurture leaders and leaders come out to start challenging the powers that be within the political party. The NRM, which prides itself in being a mass party, you would see that if you want to be, dispelled from that party, demonstrate that you have leadership to challenge, the general on top of the tree, and then you will see how you'll be fought, and before you know, you will either resign or go out disgruntled. And therefore, the lack of tolerance to see, young people exercising their powers and what they can be, and the truth must be told, because you see, it is natural that a young and upcoming leader with the potential to take over might sometimes demonstrate that they're more powerful than the principal, and therefore it's upon the principal to be humble and tolerant. But you don't see tolerance going through all the political parties we have around, and therefore, because of that, it remains to be seen how sustainable that is going to be. And of course, let me also say this: as I look on the horizon, it does seem that Dr. Paul Kaunga Semogerere would learn something from what his predecessor Ben Chwanaka went through. Because you would see that he would always avoid pushing the military establishment to the limit, because he had seen what Ben Chwanaka had gone through, because he lost his life in there. And of course, kudos to him, because then that has helped him survive. And one of the things we always urge politicians is to consider political survival, to consider survival as on the arena as something very important. It's of no consequence for you to come and push the regime and get to be eliminated in no time. So you would think he learned from that. But also the fact that he comes and works with the regimes, because Ben Chwanaka did work with the regimes as well, comes and works with the Obote regime. 1980 works with the regime of NRM. 1986. You get to see that that those he learned from his predecessor Ben Chwanaka. Back to you, Felix.
Thank you. Just a bit of fact here. In fact, what we are still celebrating, and the point I'm emphasizing is that the late Dr. Paul Kaunga Semogerere, because he believed in nurturing, he is the founder of the Foundation for African Development, a civil service advocacy and capacity organization that molds generation of political practitioners, and many of the politicians have gone through, especially DP politicians have gone through that foundation. That's how much he believed in nurturing leaders, the man, the icon we are celebrating today. Our time is pretty spent. Gives me just one question. It's more about where, now that the icon, the candle has burned out, where does this leave DP? And especially looking at the difficulties DP is in at, because he was that rallying, that emblem, that point of convergence. Where does this leave DP, especially DP without a man like Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere? Let me start with you, Henry Kasachi. Unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. I think what this is, it leaves DP in a soul-searching mode. If the members of the Democratic Party believe and respect Dr. Semogere, they must begin on a process of searching for the values he lived for in their politics. We must begin seeing people respecting the values Dr. Semogere stood for in their political practice. It is not enough to talk about truth and justice. It's not enough to talk about Dr. Semogere anymore. What is important is to walk the talk Dr. Semogere was talking about. So I think that DP should go into this kind of mode. By and large, their politics in the party has not reflected these values. Much as one of their senior leaders stood for peace and non-violence, there are many in the Democratic Party, perhaps because of generational change and also because of breakdown in political education from FAD and other agencies. Majority of the leaders now do not practice these values. We are seeing a lot of internal rigging in their own internal elections, and we're looking a lot of malicious blackmail propaganda, which is not very good. So I think that the death of Dr. Semogere should give DP members an opportunity to reflect internally and practice the values Dr. Semogere stood for.
Okay, thank you, Henry. Where does this leave DP?
Yes, so my namesake just spoke about soul searching, and soul searching it has to be, because you see, if you look around what has happened over the last 37 years, DP has just gone through a 360-degree cycle, because the cycle starts with the departed Oracle of Democracy joining the broad-based government of the regime headed by Mr. Museveni. And that's where we are now, with Mao joining. So you get to see that they are back right where they started. And therefore, you cannot be, as a party, you cannot be moving in these cycles and expect to challenge for power. So I think there needs to be soul searching.
Yeah.
It did not work for them in 1986 to work in collaboration with the regime in power. It may not work again now. So I think they need to go through soul searching, and the leadership at the top in DP should be able to give way to new ideas, because you know the generations have changed, interests have changed. The things that made DP, for instance, you mentioned FAD. At the time of my leaving university, FAD was one of the very vibrant organizations, and of course they would hold dialogues and determine the direction of the country. They would challenge policy. They would get into, it acted more as a policy think tank. Can we get there and get to see what kind of DP will be? But also, it was a center for grooming leaders, because the policy analysis that was being done at FAD, and of course the dialogues that they would organize is something that DP is missing. So I think they need to get right back there and get their soul searching right, and then determine where they want to be in a way that is context appropriate and suits the generation of today. Thank you very much, and back to you, Felix. Bye. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Henry. And this brings us to a close. But if I close, there was a comment which I want to read. Can you flash it? just I'm ending with this one. Esero Abel says that the departed Dr. Paul Kawanga was an icon, was fronted political tolerance over intolerance, and which is now thriving in our body politics because of political immaturity. Well, thank you so much, Esero Abel. And that brings us to a close. We were discussing and celebrating the oracle of Uganda's multi-party politics, Dr. Paul Kawanga Semogere. And with me, I had Enrique Sacha, who is the current executive director of Dialogue and Democracy Training Center, and is also a democracy and governance expert. I also had with me Henry Muguzi, who is the electoral democracy expert and anti-corruption activist, but also the executive director of Alliance for Finance Monitoring, a Pan-African civil society organization that works on money in politics and the official political finance watchdog in Africa. I remain Felix Kafuma, your host. Until next time, same place. Bye-bye. Stay blessed.